Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome back to the session. Now, please allow me to introduce the distinguished speakers with us for the first session, Connecting the Connectivities, Driving Regional Connectivity Through Indo-Pacific Cooperative Partnership. And at this time, we have Dr. William Choong, Senior Fellow at the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute, who will serve as the moderator for today's first session. And our speakers are Mr. Pham, Senior Research Director for Policy and Strategic Initiatives at the US-ASEAN Business Council, Dr. Koga, Associate Professor at Nanyang Technological University, Mr. Connor McGuinness, Independent Consultant on ASEAN Economic Integration, Ms. Louise Liu, China Lead Economist at Oxford Economics, and last but not least, Mr. Doh-yoon, Executive Principal at the National Information Society Agency. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your very busy schedules today. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please submit them through the Q&A and program survey available via the QR code. Your input is highly appreciated. And for your information, the questions collected from the audience will be displayed on screen in front of the panelists. Thank you very much. And without further ado, let us now begin the first session of today's forum. Now, I would like to hand over the podium to our moderator, Dr. William Choong, to begin our first session. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning. I'm Dr. William Choong from the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Once again, thank you to Ambassador Kim Jae-shin and Mr. Dan Jong-gi from the Korean MOFA and the ASEAN-Korean Center for inviting us. I know we've come, me and the speakers and I, we've come from within ASEAN and from beyond. Very nice to be here in Seoul in December to be with you all. I remember I was here at the, if I remember correctly, and if you can count by the gray hairs on my head, I was here at the 10th ASEAN Connectivity Forum, I think way back in 2022. So thanks again for having us. We have about 90 minutes, 100 minutes. I'm very glad to have my fellow panelists here with me, and we met earlier, had coffee and talked about ASEAN and other issues. And I think in true ASEAN style, if you've been in enough ASEAN meetings, I'm going to start my preliminary remarks with 3 points. I hope this will help to frame the discussion. As you can see from the remarks made by Ambassador Kim earlier, ASEAN and Korea, as well as ASEAN and its other dialogue partners, have certainly made a lot of inroads, especially when it comes to connectivity. And we can see that, between ASEAN and Korea, there was a comprehensive strategic partnership that has been formed, and there's a kind of a long-running agenda, what you call the connectivity plan, that goes from 2026 to 2035. It's that basically an extension of Korea's New Southern Policy that was effected in 2 administrations ago. So that is for sure. 2, and I think that my second point is now we see ASEAN, Korea, as well as other like-minded countries like Japan, Australia, other dialogue partners of ASEAN are building effectively what you call like-minded multilateral frameworks, especially when it comes to trade and connectivity. I think if you've been in ASEAN long enough, you know that with the advent of the Trump administration in January, there's talk now of a very overarching, very ambitious kind of trade arrangements between the European Union and the CPTPP, this mega FTA traversing different regions that will cover like 60% of global GDP. And of course, as you can see from what Trump has done with so-called reciprocal tariffs, there are like-minded countries that are seeking to uphold the global trading, multilateral trading order. And I think Singapore, my home country, has joined with another 13 smaller countries to launch the Future of Investment and Trade, which brings together small and medium-sized economies to support trade, and basically, as a way of supporting the WTO system. So that's the second point I want to make. Despite what the US is doing on tariffs, there are like-minded countries that are trying to put the system forward. My last point, I think we have to be mindful that connectivity is a good thing, trading networks is a good thing, supply chains is a good thing, but I think we always have a strategic environment that is very fluid and changing. And what do I mean by that? We live in a kind of, should we say, fluid and rather challenging strategic environment. I think you can see even from the release of the Trump administration's new national security strategy and what some call it a neo-imperial kind of security strategy, that the US has taken quite a different road, to put it kindly, when it comes to its contributions to alliances and partnerships. And of course, we see this massive China-US rivalry when it comes to competition, especially in new areas like AI, rare earth minerals, semiconductors, and that is having an impact on ASEAN and the rest of countries in the Indo-Pacific. And my last point to that is, of course, we see lingering kind of competition between major powers in the region, like we've had between China and Japan over the issue of Taiwan. Comments made by Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi on contingency in Taiwan. So I think, so if I was a novelist like Charles Dickens, I think I would say that, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times for the region. And I hope that kind of sets the broad context for our discussion. Now I have 5 speakers, kind of 90 to 100 minutes. So I would encourage each of the speakers to take, and I have mentioned this earlier at our pre-meeting, about 10 minutes. 10 minutes. If you speak anything beyond 10 minutes, the curtains will drop from the ceiling, and you have to stop. So simply because we want to have more time for questions and answers and kind of questions from the floor. So again, thank you very much, and I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Pham from the US-ASEAN Business Council. He has been introduced by the MC, so I'm not going to waste time doing that. So, hi, thank you very much for coming, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for teeing us up. Good morning, Excellencies and distinguished guests. Thank you to the ASEAN-Korea Center for inviting the US-ASEAN Business Council to this important forum on ASEAN connectivity, on the regional partnerships. My name is Pham. I'm the Senior Research Director at the US-ASEAN Business Council based in Washington, D.C. So very honored to be here today and have this opportunity to share very specifically the U.S. perspective and U.S. private sector's perspective. And from the U.S., we're a little bit geographically further away than our partners here today. And of course, I'll focus, as I mentioned, on the private sector's work and cooperation with ASEAN and to support the long-term goal and vision and connectivity. So first, just to start, Dr. William mentioned a lot about the U.S. side, U.S. government, and the Trump administration. I'll start first just by very briefly sharing a little bit about my organization, the US-ASEAN Business Council. We're an advocacy organization. We support U.S. businesses in ASEAN, working in all ASEAN member states. We represent almost 200 major U.S. companies in every industry. Some companies of our membership have been in ASEAN for more than a century. Others are newcomers wanting to expand their presence. We were founded in 1984, and we're written into the ASEAN Charter, so a lot of engagements every year, working at the national level with each ASEAN members, but also regional platforms with the ASEAN Secretariat, and looking in through the room. We have a lot of partners in the room, and looking forward to more engagements on that front. Just to quickly first start by sharing a few highlights of the US-ASEAN relationship. Very broadly, US and ASEAN are key diplomatic and security partners, most recently elevating the relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2022. In terms of trade, ASEAN is the fourth largest export market for American goods, and the US is ASEAN's second largest trading partner after China. In terms of investment, ASEAN is the #1 destination for US investment in the Indo-Pacific region, more than $500 billion last year, which is higher than US investment in China, Hong Kong, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan combined. Now, on the ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan, launched earlier this year in Malaysia, I think as US ABC and the US private sector, as we look at the strategic plan, we really appreciated the whole community approach and its emphasis on intensifying engagements with external partners and stakeholders. I know that our speakers before spoke at length about the 6 identified strategic areas, as well as the key trends and key trends and factors that the strategic plan take into consideration. I think we see a lot of opportunities for collaboration with US private sector support, of course in some strategic areas more than others. And as we look at the next phase of implementation of action plans, the private sector, US private sector, hope to be part of that process, hope to plug into different platforms, again, both regionally, but as well as bilaterally with national implementation. So again, private sector, we align very closely with a lot of the trends and drivers. We have work streams in ICT, energy, customs, trade facilitation, financial services, that each touch each of the strategic areas, each of those trends. So a lot of synergies there, and a lot of these things are things that US private sector are already doing with ASEAN, with each of the ASEAN states. Now, as we look towards future cooperation and how we look at strengthening US-ASEAN connectivity, the US industry has focused on 3 key areas, and I'll touch on this just at a slightly higher level, but noting that we did present a lot of the recommendations in detail about this with the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting earlier this year, the AEM. So first on economic and trade connectivity, robust regional economic partnerships will drive ASEAN's economic integration and connectivity and unlock new trade and investment opportunities. I just highlighted that investments of US in ASEAN is very big, very robust, more than others in the region. And corporate investment is a big piece of this. More than 6,000 US companies are active in ASEAN. Many of these companies use ASEAN as a production platform to export within the region, beyond the region as well. And so one of the key points is that it's important for ASEAN to address regulatory and trade barriers to ensure fair, transparent, and business-friendly trade environment. Second factor, digital connectivity. Was very pleased to hear a lot of, all of our speakers before highlight this, the digital connectivity. ASEAN is one of the world's fastest growing internet market. The ASEAN digital economy is projected to reach $1 trillion by 2030. And one of the keys to this is the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement, or DIFA. Ambassador Tani, thank you, and Bangkok for leading the charge on DIFA. US-AVC and US private sector is intimately engaged in this, both bilaterally and with the working group, and will continue to do that. And with DIFA, once concluded and implemented, it'll boost ASEAN's competitiveness and connectivity. To realize this, ASEAN must tackle digital fragmentation, strengthen AI and data governance, and of course with the high standards and a clear implementation roadmap that hopefully includes robust and sustained multi-stakeholder engagement, and we're happy to be a part of that process. And the third area, I think looking at the next part of the journey on, it's to enhance MSME participation and developing industry-ready talents in the region and global supply chain and closing the capacity gaps, which was identified earlier. MSMEs are fundamental to ASEAN's economic growth. They make up 97+% of all enterprises in most ASEAN countries, contributing to 85% of the ASEAN employment and 45% of GDP. Because of this, it's critical to integrate MSMEs into the digital economy, especially if we want to realize this 2030 digital economy growth projection that was mentioned. And of course, acknowledging that most ASEAN governments are already and have already dedicated programs to supporting SMEs, and also noting that US private sector as well have a lot of different very robust programs, making it a big priority to partner with and support and offer training to MSMEs. So with these three considerations in mind, we have our recommendations to ASEAN as well as our engagement focus. Moving ahead and in the future, focus on two different thematic areas. One is strengthening supply chain resilience and integration by enhancing intra-regional ASEAN trade, reducing or eliminating trade barriers, and improving trade infrastructure to unlock growth and better navigate the trade and tariff dynamics that was mentioned. To achieve this, again, it's important to address the trade barriers, especially non-tariff measures, as well as the inefficiencies, and ensure that reforms meet the needs of businesses of all sides. In working with ASEAN to reduce trade barriers, industry has collaborated on efforts to improve transparency, reduce compliance costs, and overall create a more level playing field for across ASEAN for both domestic and foreign players. And in terms of enhancing trade infrastructure, this includes things like leveraging digital platforms, modernizing and digitizing systems, especially streamlining customs procedures, as well as improving investment and technical assistance. Second factor in aligning, is to align US private sector support with the strategic plan, the ACSP, and through advancing practical initiatives in digital economy, sustainability, and inclusive workforce development. So digital economy, a lot of emphasis there already. There are still a lot of challenges that remain, and cooperation with ASEAN on this front, as mentioned, has been focused a lot on DIFA process, engaging on the topic of AI and the AI working group, as well as cybersecurity. On sustainability, which is a critical priority to ensure ASEAN's growth and competitiveness and access to the global markets, we've recommended the establishment of a regional framework for circular economy, and hopefully this is something that we can work with ASEAN, the AEM, and other ministerial bodies to take forward. And then thirdly, on workforce development, as mentioned, this is an important area that US private sector has focused on. And so supporting workforce development, embedding lifelong learning and vocational training and inclusive upskilling, those are all priorities that US private sector has focused on. I think I'll wrap it up there. I know I'm coming up on time. And so overall, just looking forward to more engagements with ASEAN, especially next year, as the Philippines take over chairmanship, and as well as learn from all the other partners on the panel today as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hai, for very insightful comments. We'll take it up in questions later. And now to Professor K. Koga, who thankfully has just managed to make it in time because he just landed this morning. So the floor is yours, Professor Koga.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind introduction, dear William, and also I would like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for inviting me here. This really important topic, and then this is I'm looking forward to the more kind of discussions later on. But yes, before going into my presentation or for the presentation, I just like to kind of make a note that my kind of presentation is going to be focused on the Japan-ASEAN relations. Even though this is the Korea-ASEAN connectivity topic, but then I think somehow if you actually see the hint or the implications from the ASEAN-Japan cooperation on the connectivity, that would be great. And then I think at the end, I'd like to kind of emphasize the importance of the coordination between the external actors for the ASEAN, furthering the ASEAN connectivity later on too. So let me start from just kind of the basic thing about the ASEAN connectivity. So if you take a look at the slides, then we see the kind of long history about the ASEAN connectivity. It actually started out from the year 2010. The ASEAN launched the master plan on ASEAN, and 2016 the ASEAN actually reorganized it to the Impact 2025 master plan on the ASEAN connectivity 2025. And in 2025, this year, ASEAN connectivity, strategic plan too. So it's been always that big topic for the ASEAN, and then this is not only the economic prosperity, but also the ASEAN actually wanted to play a central role in the East Asia and in the Pacific, and then into that end, the ASEAN needs to be they are integrated somehow economically, and then also the politically to some extent. So to that end, I think the connectivity becomes the really, really important issue. And also, as we already know, that there are massive needs for the Asia to invest in infrastructure. Physical infrastructure is really important to connect the countries to country. And then this actually created the incentives for the external actors to invest more in the Southeast Asia and beyond. And as you can see, China actually launched the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013. And then following that, Japan actually tried to be competitive in the development area. Because Japan had been the #1 the country in the development of the infrastructure in Asia and beyond, so that there's a certain kind of competition actually happened, and what it actually impacted was, to some extent, it actually benefited the ASEAN, because if you see the competition, then you could actually see more options for the ASEAN countries to choose. So that the ASEAN was able to actually choose either the Japan or the China and beyond. But at the same time, then if you actually see the intensification of the strategic competition, not only between the Japan and China, but also between the United States and China, then that could actually create the kind of the negative impacts on the competition itself, because it might not be the economically beneficial competition. It's more like kind of political competition that everybody might think the zero sum. So in that sense, there are certain kind of complications happens in the infrastructure development. My question in this context, my question was what has been Japan's comparative advantage and infrastructure projects in promoting the regional connectivity in ASEAN. And just really quickly, Japan has been committed to the infrastructure development and connectivity development since the post-war era, like after the 1960s and 1970s. Because there are several kind of historical legacy that Japan needed to overcome, and then Japan actually invested a lot to facilitate economic development in the Southeast Asia. So using ODA and then trying to actually find a way to standardize certain kind of development, practice, and then Japan actually did it like for almost the 60 years or so on and so forth. What happened was so Japan continuously showed its commitment, and also like Japan actually showed the high quality the infrastructure, and then that actually created the trust in the Southeast Asia. So in that sense, the Japan-Southeast Asia relations got like really much better if you compare the in the 1960s or 1970s, and now that we could actually trust what actually we are going to envision in the connectivity, creating the port, creating the road, and also standardizing the rules and norms. These are the things that Japan actually communicate with the ASEAN countries, and then they actually made it I think to some extent successful. And right now, the most important thing that Japan is trying to push forward is probably this one, like free and open in the Pacific. You might have heard about this kind of diplomatic doctrine, but free and open in the Pacific is the part of it is actually involving facilitating the connectivity in the Indo-Pacific region, and then creating the rules and norms for the development, and then they're connecting their country so that like we could actually see the economic prosperity in this region. And then Prime Minister Kishida in 2023 actually also went into detail about the ASEAN's connectivity, and then he actually specifically mentioned that the ASEAN is one of the most important kind of connectivity areas for Japan, and then they will actually invest a lot like in this Southeast Asia. So now like we have massive number of, I mean, you don't have to go through all the kind of list of the projects that Japan launched, but then there are many different types of the project Japan pushed forward for the Southeast Asia, ranging from the Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos. I mean, you can actually name all the countries in the ASEAN. And then in addition to that, probably like the Timor-Leste as well. So Japan, there's also mentioned about this because the Southeast Asia is an important region for the connectivity. It launched the Japan-ASEAN Comprehensive Connectivity Initiative, and then that is emphasizing the importance of the quality infrastructure. If you actually create a road, even if you create a road, even if its quality was not really right, then probably like it's economically not viable, and then I think community-wise, it might not be may have the negative impact on the social society itself. So in that sense, Japan continuously emphasized the importance of the quality infrastructure, and also again, like the standard is really important. How you gonna actually maintain those kind of like the connectivity? Who would actually manage or maintain those kind of connectivity once it was built? And then Japan pushed forward the kind of human development side of the development as well. And then this was also like incorporated into the 50th anniversary of the Japan-ASEAN cooperation and friendship and cooperation. And then this, like the broader kind of diplomatic vision is somehow synergized with the ASEAN's kind of vision as well. ASEAN launched the so-called AOIP, ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific in 2019. And then the AOIP emphasized the connectivity. Again, like the connectivity is important for ASEAN because it could be the central player in the Indo-Pacific, and then so in that sense, Japan supports it, and then ASEAN actually wants it. So there are certain kind of mutual interests that like we could actually pursue, and then on the basis of that, ASEAN and Japan actually issued many kind of joint statements to mainstream the AOIP and etc. etc. So the 2025, again, like the Japan relaunched the joint statement reiterating that Japan's commitment to the ASEAN's connectivity and ASEAN is true, the genuine, and then also they actually wanted to update what has been done for the ASEAN and then the Japan from the both sides. Oh, sorry. So just kind of like with this kind of background, just jump into the conclusion. What Japan is actually trying to do is the one basic thing is if you think about the 1960s and 1970s, Japan was the economic powerhouse, so that it could actually provide certain financial and then also the economic assistance to the ASEAN. So there was a certain kind of like not hierarchical, but then there's the certain kind of relationship between them. But now that the ASEAN countries have developed, Japan emphasized now like we are gonna actually have to be the equal partner for truly equal partner, and then co-create the connectivity together. What kind of like what is the best practice, and what is the most kind of efficient way to facilitate promote the connectivity too. And then also the Japan and the ASEAN created a plan of actions, but then I think the implementation is the most important part. And I think like this is a kind of thing Japan and the ASEAN needs to push forward to create a list of to what extent those kind of vision was implemented. And then lastly, balancing between the cooperation, competition and cooperation. Because the U.S.-China strategic competition is getting more and more intense, and then if that's the case, then how could Japan facilitate, or Japan actually strengthen the tie with the ASEAN, as well as the other external partners, like the South Korea, which actually try to promote the connectivity cooperation with the ASEAN. And then so that like, we could actually create more kind of coordinated, effective version of the connectivity effort. So with that, I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Koga. I think what I can remember from what you just said is the two kind of main points about Japan being a very trusted strategic partner of ASEAN, as noted in my institute's State of Southeast Asia, and also this concept of co-creation, that Japan and ASEAN member countries are actually co-creators and kind of on the same status. I see that the person controlling the slides has been quite enthusiastic in actually pushing ahead to Connor's slides. So I do not know whether that was premeditated, but Connor, you have the floor.
Sure. I might actually move to the lectern if there's no oppositions, because I just don't have enough hands to carry everything. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for providing the opportunity to participate in today's forum. In particular, my thanks to the ASEAN-Korea Center and their excellent team for inviting me and for your logistical assistance. I was just saying to some of our panelists before, I used to organize a lot of these conferences myself, and you've really done a first-rate job, so thank you very much. Next button. Yes, it works. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to preface my remarks by emphasizing that they are a personal view, informed by a decade and a half involved in various projects relevant to ASEAN's economic integration and ongoing prosperity. Many of these have been Australian funded, while others have been supported by like-minded partners. I stress, I do not speak on behalf of the Australian government or any programs with which I've been affiliated, but my experiences certainly inform my views. So in the tradition of the great presenter and historian Lord Clark, who is on the screen right now, this presentation is a personal view. Australia's interest in Southeast Asia's connectivity is driven by national interest. Make no mistake about it. Australia's near region is second only in order of priority than the physical defence of Australia. Don't take my word for it. This is explicitly defined in the 2016 Defence White Paper, echoed as an area of prime policy focus in the Foreign Policy White Paper 2017 and Australia's Southeast Asia Strategy to 2040. A cursory look at the MAC makes it obvious as to Australia's interest in physical connectivity within and between Australia and Southeast Asia. 90% of Australia's seaborne imports and 83% of Australia's exports travel through sea routes through Indonesia and east of Papua New Guinea. However, it's not just the physical circumstances. As important as they are, it's the massive economic potential that demands Australia prioritise ASEAN connectivity. Australia's invested strategy estimates a potential trebling of trade growth by 2040. Australia is playing the long game in Southeast Asia. It is ASEAN's first and most enduring dialogue partner, upgrading the relationship to CSP status in 2021. I can tell you from personal experience that the Australian government, particularly its Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, throws everything but the kitchen sink at approving the quality and maturity of the Australia-ASEAN relationship. Australia has been steadfast in its support for the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, particularly with regards to digitalisation and entrepreneurship, trade and investment stimulation to try and reach that trebling of trade by 2040, ASEAN's Impact 2025, its successor ASEAS, and overall better approaches to infrastructure development. Australia is extremely conscious of positioning itself as one of ASEAN's leading partners, if not the leading partner. While it doesn't have the heft of others, particularly in terms of FDI, it sets itself apart by positioning itself as a high-trust partner. No hidden agenda, no quid pro quo for narrow commercial advantage, and a respect for ASEAN to be at the centre of achieving its own destiny. Despite ASEAN's extremely laudable progress and high growth potential, there remain barriers to sustaining and achieving this. Much of the challenges lie in the connectivity realm. This is affected by persistent economic strains, particularly large budget deficits or caps on public spending that limit timely investment in critical infrastructure. Furthermore, trade barriers, particularly non-tariff barriers, are stubbornly difficult to overcome. Analysis commissioned by the Japan External Trade Organization estimates that it costs more than twice as much to ship a container from Vientiane to Bangkok than it does from Bangkok to Yokohama, more than double the costs over a much shorter distance. Hard infrastructure investment continues to lag with an estimated USD $3 trillion investment gap out to 2040. However, Australia is putting its money where its mouth is when it comes to its declared policy commitment to ASEAN and Southeast Asia. Across successive Australian governments, the overwhelming bulk of ODA has been directed towards the Indo-Pacific. As at 2024, Australia counted itself among the highest ODA grants providers across Southeast Asia. Australia's development cooperation continues to extend beyond strict definitions of ODA eligibility. Programming across ASEAN and Southeast Asia is extensive and continues to grow. ODA to Southeast Asia will continue to grow by an almost $500 million Australian dollars over the next 4 years. Over my time in Southeast Asia, the character of Australia-ASEAN ODA has shifted towards consolidation at one end, but greater diversification in engagement. Fewer projects, but larger, more flagship-style investments with higher quantums of value. Engaging Southeast Asian partners through formal ASEAN badge programs or developing specific sub-regional programming or at the national level with each ASEAN member state, each of which have their pros and cons at working at either level. To give you some examples of what I'm talking about, Australia has several flagship programs that work on ASEAN connectivity at the formal ASEAN, regional but sector and country specific, and sub-regional level. Oz for ASEAN Futures is a $200 million demand-driven facility that works directly with ASEC and AMS to provide TA across all AEC pillars, while Partnerships for Infrastructure is a $300 million multi-phase facility focusing on technical support to improve the decision-making and policy processes for infrastructure development in Southeast Asia, while the Mekong Australia Partnership focuses on issues that touch on connectivity at the mainland Southeast Asia level. A key part of Australia's technical assistance in the ASEAN connectivity space is two-way knowledge exchange and people-to-people linkages. Australia's approach is not about one-way technical knowledge sharing, but also focuses on what Australia can learn from ASEAN partners. Speaking as an Australian, and for anyone that's ever gone through any of Australia's East Coast airports, I can tell you there's a few things Southeast Asia could teach Australia, as well as Korea could teach Australia, on how to manage an international airport. There are sound reasons for working at both ends of this national-regional spectrum that I alluded to before. For example, working at the sub-regional level provides a good balance between regionalism and flexibility to more swiftly adapt to changes in circumstances. It's a great way to pilot initiatives without the full glare of ASEAN-level scrutiny and acts as a testbed for ASEAN-level initiatives. One personal observation I would make is while the ASEAN member states indeed do face hard infrastructure challenges, much of the existing infrastructure is pretty decent or sufficient. Many of the connectivity deficits occur in the soft infrastructure realm, which is less attractive as a topic, but has a real impact on people and businesses' prosperity. For example, making the transport and passage of goods and people faster, cheaper, and easier is not always down to pure hard infrastructure, but it's due to the processes that are in place to manage and facilitate this. Recall the example of the cost of shipping containers from Laos to Thailand versus Thailand to Japan. Or if you have a look at the example on your screen right now, which is a single-stop, single-window inspection on the Laos-Vietnam border that allows for far more streamlined processing of goods and passengers, reducing wait times for about 50% or more. Trade, investment, and complementary regulatory frameworks is another area of discrete technical assistance Australia has supported. These can be essential in validating existing ASEAN member state-driven reforms, as well as encouraging ASEAN member states to deepen their cooperation, collaboration, and alignment. Ladies and gentlemen, this view of Australia's support for connectivity should leave you with three main impressions of my view as to the Australian approach to ASEAN connectivity. First, Australia is in for the long haul with ASEAN. It has been by ASEAN's side since its formation, and it will continue to be a long-standing prominent feature of Australian foreign policy. Second, Australia's deep strategic interest in ASEAN and its constituents is reflected by the serious quantum of funding Australia has directed towards technical assistance, and in particular people-to-people links between ASEAN member states and Australia. Finally, Australia works at all levels across ASEAN member states to support ASEAN's connectivity vision. Working this way acts as a force multiplier and a way to consolidate and ensure the long-term viability of ASEAN's connectivity initiatives. My thanks once again to the ASEAN-Korea Centre for inviting me today, and many thanks to you, the audience, for your interest in these important topics. I look forward to the discussion throughout the session, and once again, thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Connor. Definitely made it under the time required. That's very Australian. Just a reminder that if you have any questions, please put them up according to the QR code that was provided. I have some questions on my monitor already, but I think please feel free to post your questions on the board so that we can have a good discussion later. Now we will turn to Ms. Louise Liu from Oxford Economics. Louise, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I guess we are moving from different dialogue partners here in Korea for ASEAN, from the US to Japan to Australia, and now we can talk a little bit about China. So thank you ambassadors, thank you excellencies for inviting us. It's always good to share our views. At Oxford Economics, we are the largest independent group of economists globally. We try to provide independent insights, and as the head of Asia Economics, it's always interesting to see, regionalization, multilateralization at work. As economists, we love pie charts, so here are three of them, although the last two is replicated. So I suppose the question that we get asked often is ASEAN-China connectivity. Why is it important? How is it important? What forms does it take? And I would say that, it's taken many, many forms, right? Look at these bar charts here. China and ASEAN makes up roughly about 20% of GDP, global GDP. And it punches above its weight when it comes to trade. It makes up about 20-25%. The last chart is supposed to be on FDI. That's also around 20-25%. So collectively as a group, this is a pretty systemic group, if you like, and a group that, continues to challenge global status quo, continues to contribute very positively to global growth momentum. And I would say that the linkages between ASEAN and China are not just bilateral, right? They strengthen regional stability by anchoring growth. They reinforce supply chains. They ensure that the broader Indo-Pacific region remains open, dynamic, which is particularly important in this environment where trade tensions seem to be quite persistent and quite permanent. Now, again, favorite spaghetti bowl of different relationships. If we kind of zoom into trade, you can see, you might not be able to see that clearly from where you're seated, but this is really a big interweb of different agreements that are in and I don't even think this is exhaustive, different trade agreements in the region. And you can see that ASEAN is really right in the center of that, right, the nucleus of that. And one of the things that I do want to highlight is that all of these agreements are probably second to none globally, right? We talk about a lot of regional cooperation in Latin America, in European Union, but none of that really does that as dynamically as the ASEAN group here. And so, the RCEP agreement is one that I want to highlight here that unifies ASEAN, China, Korea, and a few others, and that really cement this group's centrality, right, in a bigger picture of economic growth. So that group collectively makes up about 35% of growth was GDP, but also of population as well. So it's quite a meaningful group. Now, why does being in the center of global trading relationships matter? It matters because in this current environment, it increases resilience. It allows us to be more independent of any other pockets of within the trading system that could start to fracture. That's very evident this year when we think about the trade tensions, the technology tensions that's coming between US and China. But these type of a relationship between each other, intra-regionally, also provide significant complementarity, significant economies of scales when it comes to things like manufacturing, when it comes to things like foreign investments. Now, if we think about the China-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnerships, right, the CSP, one of the many CSPs, the way we see that is it's very pragmatic, it's very functional, it's nothing that is just on the paper, right? And that is a result of both sides really having pretty shared and complementary interests. So I have a very simple infographic here which talks about, which really illustrates what does ASEAN want out of the ASEAN-China partnership. ASEAN is interested in in infrastructure. ASEAN is interested in more connectivity. ASEAN is interested in getting different groups of the economy up to speed, improving things like equality. What does China want? China is interested in increased market access. China is interested in increasing its industrial skill. So in that very pragmatic relationship, you could see that it's very complementary. It's something that provides, a bit of a win-win for both sides. And there are, roughly about 5 areas that the partnership is focused on. It's focused on supply chain resilience. I would say that this year is probably the most important out of any year in my professional career, where this is coming to the fore quite dramatically. 2, there's a lot of focus on digital economy, around aligning data governance standards, for instance. 3, around green transition. There's a lot of cooperation areas there. If you think about EVs, you think of battery materials, solar equipment, grid connectivity, those are the areas that have been very forthcoming. 4, very important, food and energy security. And 5th, we talk a lot about the goods side of things, but the services side of things, people flow, tourism corridors, that continues to thrive 2 or 3 years after the pandemic. More charts, very lovely economic charts here. Again, one of the things that we want to draw out in terms of the functionality of ASEAN-China relationships is also the fact that beyond formal agreements, market forces are also bringing ASEAN and China closer together. So since 2017, if you can see on the chart on the left, where China exports its goods to is a massive increase in that flow of goods to places like ASEAN, to emerging markets. And on the other hand, that is coming at the expense of China's exports to places like the US. Northeast Asia is an interesting example because of the skew to Japan's data. But essentially, you can see a moderation in exports to developed markets like the US, the EU, in lieu of more favorable destinations like ASEAN and Latin America. And on the chart on the right, you can really see that dependence. So not just China exporting goods to ASEAN, but why is ASEAN also dependent on China? There is a mutual interdependence here from ASEAN's perspective, in that a lot of the goods that are produced in ASEAN economies are also comprising of goods that are coming from China. So a good example is Cambodia, Vietnam, where roughly about 20%, 15% of the total domestic production comes from inputs from China. So you can see that the supply chain linkages are quite tight, and frankly, not something that tariffs or external pressures could undo easily. That's on the trade side. On the capital and investment side, Chinese outbound investments, you could see there's very relentless increases over the last few years despite the pandemic. And this is, the context of this is really that global FDI has slowed over the last 3 or 4 years. And despite that, Chinese outbound investments into ASEAN has been consistently quite strong. Now, most of that has been focused on things like automotives, so high-tech manufacturing, but a substantial share of that continues to go to consumer goods, to some of the electronic equipments that we know quite well in terms of the case studies that have come out. And of course, one of the things that that is worth stressing here is also that ASEAN is a very big part of China's strategic agenda. ASEAN aligns quite critically with its domestic ambitions, especially in terms of greening ambitions. So you think about renewable energy is one very clear example, where it's getting more and more competitive in ASEAN, and China is a key partner who is trying to tap into the increasing competitive cost of renewable energy and power sources in ASEAN. And of course, one of the big favorable parts of ASEAN is that the business environment continues to be quite favorable. You think about infrastructure, connectivity that we've talked about all morning. You think about business regulations that are more and more positive for foreign investors. It is increasingly a more favorable, more accommodative environment for foreign investments. And China is well aware of that. And of course, ASEAN is also part of the elephant in the room, where ASEAN is part of Beijing's geo-economic strategy as well, in light of the growing tensions that's happening between China and much of the Western world in the EU and the US. Now, there are a few very well-known case studies on how that's been playing out quite tangibly. Obviously, ASEAN-China linkages are expanding into many different areas. One tangible way of that linkage is the explosion, frankly, of connectivity infrastructure. So very tangible. The Lao-China Railway, that's a very key flagship Belt and Road initiative. That's the one that connects Kunming in China all the way down to Vientiane, Laos, and that stretches around 1,000 kilometers. And that's really part of a broader project that's, Pan-Asia Railway Network that really brings Kunming all the way down to Singapore, where we came from yesterday. And that dramatically reduces overland travel times from days to just hours. And that has a very strong economic impact in terms of bringing things like agricultural products, which are more time sensitive, in good time to the different trading partners along that route. So there's a very clear economic spillover effect here that I think is one rising tide that lifts all regional boats. Another example of greater connectivity and logistics is the China-Singapore Nanyang International Logistics Park. So that's the one that is a joint venture logistics hub that positions as a gateway connecting between Western China to ASEAN, specifically facilitating the trade route that links Choong and inland Chinese cities down to ASEAN's ports via rail and road. So that's kind of on the hard infrastructure side. On the kind of softer part, we are seeing a lot of Chinese investments going into the 3 new sectors as well. So the 3 new sectors in China refers to renewables, batteries, and electric vehicles. There's been a lot of momentum in that. We can see, 3 very clear examples here is renewable energy in Laos. That's a big one. Electric vehicle manufacturing in Thailand, as Thailand continues to establish itself as a key hub for manufacturing in automotives. And then there are big flagship projects as well as in Indonesia relating to the nickel and battery supply chain. One of the things that, when we speak to investors, when we speak to market participants is that, yes, it's all well and good, ASEAN connectivity is bringing a lot of economic benefits, but there are also a lot of risks. There are a lot of things that we can learn from, challenges that have come to the fore that we can take lessons away from. And I would say that, there are a few things that if we could provide recommendations for, a few things. So one is, I think, looking at, the lessons learned over the last few years. One of the key strategy I would think going forward is for different economic partners to sharpen industrial policies, to reduce duplication in strategic areas like electric vehicles, batteries, solar incentives, that really, frankly, with a lot of strategic partners on the table, have led to a bit of an oversupply and a bit of a duplication. There is a second point about strengthening debt sustainability, especially when it comes to Belt and Road initiatives, especially when it comes to lending mechanism. I think there's a lot more transparency that could come to the table as we think about forward frameworks. There is also scope to build more ASEAN-wide standards. There is a need to prioritize supply chain diversification. And finally, perhaps more relevantly to the population at large is the services integration, which continues to be one area that has tremendous scope for leveraging given the extensive advantage that ASEAN enjoys. So a lot to watch out for and a lot of collaborations opportunities going forward. But with that, I would pause here before the curtain comes down on me.
Thank you so much, Louise. That was a very data-rich presentation. Couple of questions waiting in the wings, but we'll have Mr. Kim has a presentation on connectivity and data infrastructure. Mr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you everyone for inviting me, and it's an honor to be here at the Asian Connectivity Forum. It's actually my first time, and I'd like to maybe give you a brief introduction of where I come from in terms of because I've seen all these presentations before me, and this as the last speaker. I don't want to take too much time, but to understand my presentation, so I think we need to talk a little bit more about my organization, which is the National Information Society Agency. So we're specialized in the digital economic side or digital government side, more so public sector digital, I guess, development. So we like to think of ourselves as being synonymous with the digital development of Korea itself. So beginning with e-government or the first introduction of the basic infrastructures and computers since the 1980s. So that's where we come from. And for today's presentation, I'd like to focus on maybe the digital side of our relationship and cooperation with the Asian connectivity. So, wait a minute. Okay. So I would like to introduce one of our projects that we've been working on. This is the ASEAN Data Ecosystem Development Project. So it's actually a project that, we'll start with the project period, which is from 2024 to 2028. That was the original intent. Right now, we have a bit of delay. I think we'll actually start from the beginning of 2006, actually. So I'll give you a little bit more information on that. So the project budget is about $4.5 million. It is from the Asian and then ROK Cooperation Fund. and we are the project independent agency, and we'll be working with the ASEAN Secretariat as well as more Korean experts to complete the project. So the objective of this project is to improve the technical and policy capacity through knowledge sharing and mutual cooperation activities among member states and Korea. So basically the activities would comprise of sharing knowledge and building a data ecosystem, coordinating the project. Targets will be like government officials in charge of AI data and from ASEAN member states. So these would include forming thematic communities of practices to conduct joint research in AI and data, of course, and hosting annual forums and things like that for share achievements and insights. So the original plan was to begin this year and to host like an Asian Data Forum in Malaysia, which was the Asian chair this year. So, but from the progress of the project, I would think that we are actually expecting maybe January, February next year. So since the chair has gone to is going to Philippines, it might actually change. But this is kind of not totally set as yet. Okay, so the other part is the Asian Big Data Platform. So maybe I forgot to mention, but this is actually a second phase of a more long-term, I guess, development for the big data or data ecosystem for the ASEAN project. So we actually had another project. I think that was mentioned by the one of the congratulatory remarks from Malaysia. So it's the data dictionary project that our agency did in, I think, 2021 to 2023. So that was the beginning. One of the things that we found out during the study was that there's a huge discrepancy between, let's say, the highest performing members of the Asian states and the lowest in terms of how the availability of data and actually the usage of data itself. So one of the key things that we focused for the second phase is how do we actually, bring all of those things together and to try to normalize and share ideas and to get our capacities to a level where we can share and I guess reap the rewards of the of data, because as you know, data is a key I guess infrastructure to and resource that we need in terms of our digital economy. And one of the things I think that's been mentioned many times here is that one of the highest, I guess, growth sectors for the Asian economies is the digital sector. So, trying to get these big data, and not just big data, I mean data, especially nowadays, as we mentioned before, there is the push for AI. And even from our organization point of view, especially with the new administration that's coming to that has come into power this year, the biggest push is towards AI, and of course, even for me, like the name of our my department is going to change to digital AI or something like that. I mean, everyone's changing to AI, and the most important thing for AI is data. And in order for Asian economies to grow even further and to share data is important. So that's why we're trying to create this big data platform, which the biggest problem that we had, I think I can mention that from the data dictionary project, is finding the data itself was difficult, depending on who you're talking to. And we had some help from the Asian ASEAN Secretariat, but that was, I think, the biggest pain point. So one of the things that we're going to address through the second phase is where we have to search and try to make the process of searching and looking up data as easy as possible. So this is the idea that we came out with in order to create this big data platform. And the approach that we're going to take is not actual data sharing itself. So the reason being is it's really difficult to actually share data. In order to share data, we need to standardize all of the protocols and every let's say metadata and everything has to be in standards. So that's not something that we can do in a short term. But in the short term, we think we can by just collecting metadata and the linkages that we can share, that we can get a federated or integrated data catalogs and metadata, so we know where to look and where to find. So this is the idea of our big data platform. So the consideration in developing these big data platforms is like, we looked at the 10 Asian member state open data portals, and we also need to, and this data portal is not just for public sector, we also want to be able to bring private sector data into this as well. So we're looking at private data platforms, open data platform portals of different, all of our 10 nations. I think though, I believe we have an additional member state, maybe the East Timor, right? So maybe 11, depends. Anyway, so at the same time, we want to be able to support AI training data sets and data utilization as well. So the objective being to support the advancements of AI research in industry in Asian member states by providing access to high quality AI training data. And from Korea, our agency has actually been the head implementation agency for developing or actually creating data sets with the private sector for a few years running, and it was a massive project. And we I think over yearly like $100 million per year was spent in doing that. So we have a lot of data that we can actually share with the ASEAN member states in terms of providing things that we can use to do AI training. So the activities, as I mentioned, provides facilitating use of AI training data based on the needs of different member states. Of course, the assessment will need to conduct a demand survey and discuss data priorities. And because due to the, I guess, we can't cover all of the data, so we're trying to prioritize maybe 2 sets of data. The original data dictionary was on health and farming, I think, logistics and these kind of things. So it'll really depend on what's most important, what different areas that each member state will prioritize. We have different methods that we want to, option 1, of course, in provisioning is cloud-based training model without data downloads, and this will depend on like if you have GPUs or not, or maybe we can provide the GPUs for in a cloud solution. Of course, another element would be capacity building. So, to strengthen data utilization capabilities of government officials, universities, and startups in the Asian member states. This will include data analysis environment training programs. We could provide cloud-based infrastructure for data analysis and access for data for training, providing online, offline training programs as well. The project timeline is actually from originally from 2004 to 2024 to 2028, but it's been kind of we haven't been able to begin yet, and maybe I can kind of ask the ASEAN Secretariat, I think, to help us begin the project. I think we're actually at the last phase of the approval from the ASEAN Secretariat, so if we get that approval, we can begin soon. Some of the expected issues is, like, as I said, regulations on cross-border data sharing. This is kind of something that it's been problematical and difficult for everyone, but we would like to address this through the data ecosystem that will not only collect actual data, but only metadata. So this is going to make it easier for the different, I guess, regulations that we might not need to be too concerned about. So one of the things, that's why, while the original project, I think in 2024, 2003, we actually wanted to be able to have a full-scale, data sharing platform. But we've been able, through the different, talks and dialogues that we had, and maybe some lessons learned from our previous project, we are kind of toning down a little bit more, but at the same time, still be able to provide effective and solutions. So this is one of the things that we're working on. We will also fully comply with the ASEAN framework on digital data governance throughout all the processes. So anyway, so if the progress will begin maybe soon, our organization will conduct pre-feasibility study after the project insurance. And that concludes my presentation. And maybe one thing that I'd like to add, maybe, and this is something that I think, if you, maybe a recommendation in terms of when you're looking for new projects and for cooperation and from Korea in terms of digital, regular is the big push towards AI, I think. And so if you really want to maybe continue and maybe create new projects, you it's pretty much a requirement to put AI somewhere in there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim. Can we go to that slide where you talk about open data and public data? Yes, the next one. Yeah. So for the layman who's not into AI and kind of this data infrastructure system, so what's the difference between open data and private data?
Oh, here we mean open data portals are more like government, public sector data.
I see. Okay.
So, and the private data, of course, are data from the private sector. That would be the easiest way to.
Okay. And again, this is metadata, right? So it's only the, again, I'm a layman, but it's only the kind of the top line.
Yeah, right. Yeah. True. So for example, depending on, if you want, let's say if you want to know like what type of, certain, maybe Singapore has a very robust, health, let's say, database, and you wanted to know what kind of database and what kind of data that it stores. This is something you can look at through by looking at the metadata. And if you really want the specific data that's provided at the open data portal in Singapore, and we can kind of give you a catalog of metadata and maybe an address to look into. So you can use our platform to search for what the types of data that you want, and you can find and link to where the data are. So you can go and find them.
Okay, thank you. And just another simple question. So is this available to people in ASEAN? Is this an open platform that can be accessible, or is closed?
I think that we are going to initially maybe start from closed for government officials, but looking at the projects and going forward, and as I said before, it'll start maybe as a small, test bed, but we are looking to open it to anybody.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Kim. I have another question for you, so just hang on for 30 seconds. But the person who gave me this tablet with the questions, the tablet seems to have taken a walk, seems to have taken a mind of its own. So can you help me with the tablet, please? But I think I have a question here from the floor for Mr. Kim. The question is, in your opinion, what types of data will be prioritized within this ASEAN big data platform, and how will they be leveraged to support how would they be leveraged to support ecosystem development among ASEAN member states?
The question is what I think would be the two most important priority data sets, and the second question was I didn't.
And how will the platform be leveraged to support ecosystem development in ASEAN countries?
I think okay. So one of the things that we identify, as I mentioned before, is health, and then of course the other is any data on agricultural. I think this is one of the bigger, I guess, common areas of interest for the ASEAN members, and this was actually the focal point, I guess, for the first study. But we are going to. There will be a process of consultation among all the member states to maybe the priorities have shifted, or depending on what eco, I guess, system that you want to develop first. Like, it could change, but that was it. In terms of facilitating development of different ecosystems, I think, and I think I mentioned before, data is very important. So one of the things that we wanted to focus on through this project, it's not here, but at the same time, we also are trying to, let's say, create a network of digital focal points or digital connectivity, as you will. We're going to try to round up all of the relevant stakeholders in different countries to share, experiences and to share ideas on how to develop different ecosystems utilizing different types of data that everybody has. So, and I think, and also at the same time, of course, there's a lot of capacity building there involving as well. So initially, though, I think something that could be done quickly would be maybe things for the providing digital services to the public, like public sector digital government, digital governance issues, and trying to educate the civil servants or the public officials in how to utilize and collect data. Right. So one of the things, and I think this kind of ties in with how how you use AI, and the question of AI sovereignty is also data sovereignty is also another thing. Is one of the things that personally I think is very important for all the ASEAN countries, and especially Korea as well, is how to create or collect useful data. Because this is something that was one of the things that we found out, as I mentioned before, the disparity between different ASEAN members countries in terms of how much data is actually being collected and how much useful data that's actually being categorized and classified in ways to improve the economy. So maybe that's one of the things that we want to be able to jumpstart for different economies.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kim. I'm sorry, but the tablet seems to have adopted an AI brain of its own. So, but thanks for your questions. We only have about 20 minutes, so I'm going to kind of put the questions to my respective speakers. There's a question here on the U.S. private sector, and I suppose that's targeted at Mr. Hai. The question is, how will the U.S. private sector align its initiatives with the ACSP, the ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan, and what are the top opportunities for ASEAN-US collaboration? Hi.
Thank you so much for the question. I think in the very start of the program, we opened with a video that showed the list of the 6 strategic areas and the 7 trends. A lot of those, I mentioned during my presentation, a lot of those trends, those key trends that are tracked, and a lot of the strategic areas of cooperation are things that the U.S. private sector are already doing. There's collaboration opportunities in each of the sectors. I think digital is a big one for sure. Digital collaboration is important, and I think for us that's been the top message, and that may be because that's the biggest topic that AI is sexy right now, right? But there's collaboration opportunities in health, and sustainability is a big one, and energy as well. Supply chains and trade facilitation are also areas that U.S. private sector are working very, very closely with ASEAN, each of the member states, and as mentioned, health and agriculture are also 2 parts. And throughout the year, US-ABC and U.S. private sector, we have the opportunity to bring U.S. business delegations to each of the ASEAN countries, as well as the different regional forums, ministerial meetings, things like that. And those are opportunities where we're able to raise some of those initiatives. Sometimes they're very specific initiatives, a lot focused on capacity building opportunities, but a lot also focused on policy, regulatory issues as well. how we break down some of those non-tariff barriers to trade. I think that's a lot of things that we focus on.
Thanks, Hai. So follow-up question. I'm sorry that you have to, as being from the US-ASEAN Business Council, you have to become the de facto representative for the United States here. But just a simple question. So you mentioned during your presentation that US private sector, US industry is seeking to help ASEAN SMEs in regional and global supply chains.
Yep.
As we know, I mean, between China and the US, there's effectively a fight for bifurcated supply chains, a kind of a China-centered supply chain, and then the US-centered supply chain, whether it's semiconductors, whether it's rare earths, production network. So how is the US-ASEAN Business Council navigating this, given that, there's a lot of pressure being put to bear by China and the US on ASEAN and ASEAN companies?
Right. Thank you.
Easy question.
Easy question. No, of course, U.S.-China tensions and competition is a big topic. I think that as we're U.S. ABC, we're bipartisan, so we work with the U.S. government no matter what. I think that the big focus for us is, especially when we're in ASEAN, is to separate the two, to say that U.S. private sector and our interest and focus in ASEAN is sometimes doesn't have to be aligned with U.S. government's views and how they operate in Southeast Asia, right? We can share our views to the U.S. government to say that, certain trade platforms, we recommend that USG is there. We recommend that, there are more visits and more cooperation. But at the end of the day, U.S. private sector is invested in ASEAN, continues to have tight and close relationships, cooperation with each of the ASEAN member states, including Timor-Leste, and across the board. And so I think U.S. businesses are showing up and are continuing investments, and we face the same uncertainties, and our companies face the same uncertainties that ASEAN countries and companies and SMEs are facing as well. So we're facing these uncertainties too. We're navigating that as well. But trade is global, and we've been working with ASEAN countries to continue to promote global trade and trade among ASEAN. And it doesn't have to focus specifically on that question. But yep.
Thank you very much. Hi. Next question is for Professor Koga. I note again what you said about Japan's contributions to ASEAN connectivity. There is a question here, and it's kind of a multi-pronged question, and I'm afraid I have to lay it on you. But the question is, what practical steps can Japan and the ROK and ASEAN take to achieve genuine co-creation that reflects local context and shared priorities? So basically, what can Korea, Japan, and ASEAN do to advance genuine co-creation?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. And then this
Not
is
my question.
yeah.
No.
I mean the question. Yeah, thank you. This is important, and then also like the complex. What I actually see is that usually like when you pursue the development project, then you are on your own, right? Like you're gonna actually consult probably like with the government and then the local communities, and then try to actually create the certain infrastructure or like the skill transfer, whatever. And what I see is that there's a kind of missing link between the country to country. So if you actually see for example, Mekong River Cooperation, then there are several kind of institution framework that actually try to kind of nurture the capacity building the program in the local communities from the US Mekong, Japan Mekong, and also the Korea Mekong and the China Mekong. So, and the Australia Mekong too. I think like these are the certain kind of like the divisions that like we see, and then sometimes like project overlaps, and then it is probably like the difficult to pursue the joint project because there are several kind of the fiscal year kind of differences and also budgeting differences and et cetera, et cetera. But what we actually want to know is what kind of projects were pursued in a particular community, and then they also we need to actually understand if whether local community really wants that kind of project as well. So I guess what we want to know is more kind of the coordination and also information dissemination about the infrastructure or connectivity project, so that we don't. I mean, if the Korea ASEAN is doing this field, then probably we can actually supplement that kind of project by doing this, or you could actually see the kind of big picture about their connectivity. So I think this type of the kind of institution, like the one-stop kind of the institution where you could actually get the information from and then you see the big picture. I think that's the most probably important things to do.
Thanks very much, Kay. I just have a more general question for you. Again, you talk about Japanese contributions to ASEAN, Japanese investments. I think the bigger point here is, Japan in many ways is seen as kind of a big brother to ASEAN, essentially, the Kanichi Omae with, the flying geese principle, Japan leading the way for smaller economies. And we saw Japan's role when the US withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership in 2017. Effectively, it was Japan, I believe Australia, who basically midwife the TPP to make it, the comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. What role do you think Japan can play today, now that we are in Trump 2.0 with all the uncertainties and the risks, in terms of fostering that ASEAN connectivity, ASEAN community?
I think there should be the two things. One is just kind of maintain what they have been doing, right? The Japan has been kind of committed to the Southeast Asia for the connectivity, economic development, the security cooperation, et cetera. And then even though Japan has a strong tie with the United States, that could be a separate issue. Then you don't have to get dragged to by the U.S. kind of foreign policy, and then stay away from ASEAN, and then align with the United States to push back or counter China, etc. You don't have to do that. I think what we probably need to do is we need to keep kind of staying the calm and then doing the same thing. They are committed to the ASEAN's development. So that's a kind of one. And then second thing is probably so if you actually objectively look at Japan, Japan used to be really strong economically, but then now if you see the demographic change and also the economic decline, it's a kind of it's kind of sad truth, but it's a declining power unless Japan is going to do something. So what I think but still I think there's a potential or the more kind of opportunities that Japan can actually take a leadership. That is more kind of providing certain kind of ideas and then the creative ideas and then the projects, so that the region itself can be the more kind of vibrant economically and politically, so that they could actually pursue the more kind of the cooperative the projects. So I believe the idea, entrepreneur, normal entrepreneur, could be the one of the roles Japan can play in the future.
Thank you very much for that, Kay. I'm going to skip Connor for a minute and go to Louise, since China is such an important issue. Louise, I've got this question from the floor about debt traps. So the person posing the question talks about the Lao-China Railroad and how it's in the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. And the person has said that there are questions about debt traps in relation to Belt and Road and China's digital Silk Road. So this is the question. What are your thoughts on the economic readiness of ASEAN when it comes to involvement in such large infrastructure and investment projects? And how can Korea and ASEAN collaborate to prevent such issues, such debt trap issues in investment projects? Perhaps you can also give us your prognosis whether that is actually a debt trap issue, because I think that's a rather controversial topic.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I think, to answer your question point blank, right? I
Again,
think,
not my question.
oh, sorry.
On the floor.
To answer the floor's question point blank, I think there is a real risk of debt traps, right? Because if you think about the financing arrangement, the concession terms that are in some of these arrangements, not just going beyond ASEAN, I think about Sri Lanka, I think about some of these more frontier economies that are receiving the lending agreements from as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, there is a real risk of debt traps, especially given that the starting point for a lot of these economies are quite weak on the fiscal sustainability front, right? So one of the things that I think ASEAN has got going for it is that a lot of the governments in ASEAN have got very strong balance sheets. So that's a strong starting point. Now going forward, what we are seeing over the last few years, I would say, maybe the last 1 or 2 years, more specifically, is that the Belt and Road Initiative has really expanded beyond, the kind of traditional relationship between Chinese state-owned financing vehicles and the ASEAN counterpart. It's really moved beyond that towards the private sector, and that's where we think, that should help enhance some of the, well, at least mitigate some of the risk of debt traps from happening. Because if we get a private sector involved, there is also a certain level of transparency that needs to happen when it comes to repayment terms, when it comes to how different parts of the stakeholders can play into the financing agreements of these projects. So I think the structure is slowly evolving to mitigate some of these immediate risks. But we're talking about big projects under the Belt and Road and under other initiatives. We're talking about long-term infrastructure projects, right? So we have to think about sustainability at a 15, 20-year time frame. That's not easy analysis. That's something that requires a lot of on-the-ground expertise, a lot of analysis on the returns of investments. And I think, that's probably an area that more collaboration, more technical assistance could be needed in that area. I hope that answers the floor's question.
Yeah, so the second question, so forgive the double barrel, but the second question was, so how can Korea and ASEAN collaborate to prevent such kind of debt trap issues, if possible?
Yeah, I think the way we talk about Japan being the big brother, I think Korea is probably like the second big brother. Yeah,
second big brother.
Yeah, in that it has a lot of expertise in building up, in implementing big projects. It has a lot of expertise, obviously very deep capital markets, a lot of financing expertise that really can be part of that assistance to some of these arrangements that are between China and ASEAN. So I think, from a I would say, a mentorship perspective, from an assistance perspective, there is that the avenue to explore further.
Thanks very much for that. I'm sorry, I know we are running out of time, but I do have 2 questions for Connor, so I can we just take another 5-ish minutes? Is that okay? Eat into your lunch. Yeah. So now, Connor, I've saved the best for the last. This is my question. Personally, from me, from somebody who follows ASEAN and Australia. You mentioned the invested report, the Moore report about Australia's plan for Southeast Asia going out to 2040. I think Ewan Graham, in the think tank field, a Brit, asked Penny Wong, the Australian foreign minister, that ASEAN matters to Australia. The question is whether Australia matters to ASEAN, right? So, and I think Ewan is a friend of mine, he does have a point, because if you look at Australia's investment into ASEAN, trading and investment relationship, a lot of ambition, but falls short of potential. 2 data points. In 1980, Australia's economy was 85% that of ASEAN. Today, the combined economy of ASEAN is twice as big as Australia. ASEAN is Australia's 2nd largest trading partner, but Australia is ASEAN's 8th largest trading partner. And again, in terms of share of total trade, ASEAN's share of Australia's total trade is 15%, but Australia's share of ASEAN trade is 3.4%. So, so there seems to be a lot of ambition that Australia is expressing towards ASEAN, but it's kind of falls short of potential in that department. So how would you answer to that?
So this is a little bit like the old saying, you might not care about politics, but politics cares about you.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's Australia, Ray, ASEAN, right. I think there's a couple of things there. One is to break down the trading relationship. I've always personally, this isn't an official view by the way, but I've always personally hated the second largest trading partner statistic that's always trotted out at certain official statements that are made, either Austrade or DFAT or whomever, because ASEAN is a grouping, but I wouldn't say it's purely a single market. If you split it down by those different countries, the trade volume between Indonesia is markedly different between the trade volume between Myanmar, for example, or Cambodia versus Vietnam, for example. So I think it's a little bit misleading. I completely take your point regarding the investment relationship. I think possibly it was more himself that said, Australia invests more in New Zealand than it does in Southeast Asia. And there are many sound reasons for that, in the sense of, Australia and New Zealand have the same regulatory framework, they're right next to each other, speak the same language, and the Anglosphere tends to invest in itself. I mean, the US and the UK have been the top investors in Australia for time immemorial. I used to work for the Foreign Investment Review Board, and basically, our agricultural sector is either owned by, US or Californian pension funds. And on that point, I would actually also reverse it again, because, okay, if ASEAN is substantially wealthier and has substantial amounts of capital, why isn't ASEAN investing into Australia? And that is something that, when, again, we're at the FIRB, was a big problem. Austrade would go out and go to, like Midpon and big Thai companies like that, going, you've got lots of capital, you want to grow your investment, why not invest here? And a lot of it is around, taxation and unsure of the regulatory environment and whatnot. But that said, I would encourage Southeast Asian firms to actually lobby Australian authorities regarding access, because we do have an extremely unique foreign investment regime. As opposed to Australian investment into Southeast Asia, well, one is the lack of familiarity of the opportunities. It's really a much more longer term play than a lot of Australian-based firms are willing to engage in, because they like the familiar. Secondly, there's just not that many Australian firms in inverted commas, because again, having worked in foreign investment in Australia, a lot of our firms are actually foreign owned. They're part of larger groups, and so they'll be operating at the behest of their parent companies. It's just the economic reality of consolidation. So that's a half-baked answer to your question, a rather difficult one.
Thanks, Connor. Now, this is the final question. I think it should be an easier question, Connor, from the floor. It talks about Timor, Timor-Leste. So the question is, hang on a second, this tablet is giving me a headache. The question is Australia's approach to East Timor after Timor has become a new ASEAN member state. Taking into account Timor's history with Indonesia and Australia's cautious approach / non-interference to Indonesia's internal affairs, can you give us some insight into Australia's approach to Timor becoming a new ASEAN member?
Yeah, so Australia's relationship with Indonesia, I would probably, it's right up there with DC, Tokyo, London. It is extremely important. I would say the cautious approach was slightly upended in the late 90s when East Timor became its own country, or voted to become its own country, and there was a significant security operation due to the sensitivities around that. But I think Australia was extremely sensitive to all of the various elements, which we don't need to go into here, which is why Australia was extremely keen to have its deputy field commander be a Thai or an ASEAN member who happened to be a Thai but had to be an ASEAN representative as the deputy interfet commander. On the managing Timor's accession to ASEAN, Australia was fully behind it, as if I may say, on their behalf, Indonesia. This was very much I think it's not uncontroversial to say, a very much supported in full force by Indonesia and very much echoed by Australia. And they've provided, particularly through the Persever program, large amounts of technical assistance to East Timor to manage that process, among others, I must say. And interestingly, I've just written a report on that accession. It's more focused on what the private sector needs to do, and in particular, and the government to support them in the face of what's really coming down their way in terms of just the sheer scale and demand that membership imposes just by being a member, which is imposed under the Charter, and Timor-Leste is the first country to join under the Charter, actually. So I would say watch this space. I know for a fact that the Australians are already in discussions with the Timorese about the next stage of the Persever program. I would say that, again, look at the quantum of funds. It's probably going to be announced within the next however long, and it will probably be quite a large volume and will probably be sustained for some time.
Thank you very much for that, Connor. And thank you for your patience for sitting through this rather long session, but will you please join hands to express, the usual note of appreciation to the speakers. It was a very comprehensive kind of discussion, and I hope it framed discussions for the following session, session 2 and session 3. Apologies for having eaten into your lunchtime, but this is an ASEAN thing. We tend to talk too much and do. So thank you again, and thanks for inviting us. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the wonderful moderation and for all of the insights to our panelists as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them another big round of applause. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite everyone back to their seats. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our discussion for session 1. And finally, we will now break for lunch. Please do enjoy your break, and please return to your seats by 1:30. Thank you very much. Bon appetit.